Okay.
Oh,
I feel
okay.
much more betterer. Do we have that?
I'm recording now. Yeah, I'm recording now.
Yay! All right. Now we can properly share on Facebook, share in a group.
No. Hold on, I gotta put my horn back on.
Oh, you're about to scare me. Okay, it's going. It's preparing.
Oh.
So prepare yourselves. Y'all-selves.
Shake yourself before you break yourself.
You guys have a lot of good feedback for the photos today. Olga, you didn't do your homework.
No, I did do my homework. I just have nothing to say. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
We are live. All right, Kate.
Yeah.
You got your horn on. We are live. Take it away.
I don't have a onesie, so I had to improvise with these sweet Cobra Kai socks that Renee bought me for Secret Santa Krampus thing. Also, before we get started, I need to show everyone something really important. Hold.
Very important.
If you recall our drunk art talk,
our drunk table.
My artist was Hieronymus Bosch because he's a nut job. And I got these really sweet Hieronymus Bosch leggings.
Yeah.
Actually, my friend Amy got them for me, so shout out to Amy. And also, I feel like everyone needs to see this shirt because, you know, it's a real thing. Okay. Thanks for coming to the Kate Show. I'm Kate. The unicorn's Nicole, and the narwhal is Olga. And yeah, if you're just tuning in for the first time, we're photographers and friends, and we like to talk about photos.
Indeed, we does.
Certified weirdos.
Definitely weirdos. So
100%.
We have 4 images today. Unfortunately, Kelly and Ella cannot join us this evening, sadly. So we will soldier on without them. But got 4 images on the lineup today, and it'll be good. Nicole and I will talk too much, like we always do. Yeah.
And Olga will make fun of us and say clever quips like she do.
Yeah. Olga, what noise does a narwhal make?
I think
that's 100% true. I like that a lot.
I still sound like an old man.
Olga makes herself laugh.
Oh, it looks almost like we weren't live. Weren't we live?
Oh, we weren't. So, but now we are.
Oh, but we will be in just a second.
Meaning is not
streaming live now. Do we have to do that whole thing over again?
Yep. Let's take one. Yep.
I'm always best.
Maybe not. I think it was it good? Oh, no. Okay, now we're good. Okay. We have to do it all over. Kate Woodman.
Oh.
Take it away again.
Again. We already did this, but apparently we weren't live, so sorry.
It'd be all right.
I'm here today with Nicole the unicorn and Olga the narwhal. That's the sound a narwhal makes. I'm gonna put my horn on. Feel left out. This is a sock that came from Renee. She gave it to me as Secret Krampus gift. Cobra Kai.
Cobra Kai.
Cobra Kai.
No mercy.
Also, I want to share something very important with everyone right now. If you recall from our drunk round table, where we all selected artists to bash, my artist was Hieronymus Bosch, who's a crazy nut job from Netherlands. I don't even remember. Anyway, these are my Hieronymus Bosch leggings.
Yes.
Solid.
Yeah.
Aw, yeah.
Aw, yeah.
Thanks, Amy Gillespie, for my birthday present. These are fantabulous.
They're so good, because now I need some. So, Amy, where did these come from? Because I want.
Hook us up, Amy. I know she likes to watch our show.
Hook a girl up.
Anyway, we are sadly missing Kelly and Ella today. They're not feeling so hot. So we are soldiering on without them.
Sadly.
We
Very
got our,
sadly.
sadly, yeah, we might cry a little bit, but
A little.
I laugh to keep from weeping.
I laugh but to keep from weeping. What movie, Olga?
Oh,
I laugh but to keep from
quote a
crying.
movie and not know it.
A Knight's Tale. A Knight's
Yeah.
Tale.
Oh no, there's others. I was
Yeah,
thinking,
but that was when she was in the church.
Oh,
And
that's
the
true,
monk
right,
was
yeah.
like, or the guy.
yeah, you
I don't
did. You
remember.
praise the house
The
of
house
God.
of God. Yes. And she's like, I laugh but to keep from weeping.
That's right. Okay.
Oh, to be
Would you
born
like
with
to
this
bring-
face.
Cool. So this show is now about the movie A Knight's Tale.
Yeah.
Although it could
So,
be and should
please,
be possibly.
Please fast forward to minute 33. Anyway, what are we doing? Oh, we're critiquing photos. That's what we do here. It's the thing that we do.
Yeah.
So we got our usual 4-image lineup for the evening. And anything else? Should we get going?
I think we good.
All right.
Oh, we have Molly with us.
Molly.
Woo-hoo, even though it's 3 a.m. Yay.
Molly, it's past your bedtime.
She doesn't
Don't
sleep.
discourage her.
Okay. I just want to make sure she's getting her proper beauty rest.
She's so beautiful.
Share.
I bet she don't even need to sleep.
Mm-mm.
No. Or she's a vampire.
Molly, are you a vampire?
Correct.
F. Okay, did it. Ow. As I bit my tongue earlier, so now my tongue is swollen and it hurts to talk. So
Oh no.
super fun. Okay. This is image number 1. Who's starting? I nominate Nicole.
Oh, thanks for that.
Welcome.
So, I think my first impression is that this is a beautiful child with the longest eyelashes I've ever seen.
True
Look
that.
at those. Those are some eyelashes. I am super jealous of those. Yeah, look at those suckers. They're up past the top of the lid.
It's
And
not
they're this
fair.
beautiful blonde with the little blonde tips. That's like so lovely. What a beautiful child. So the styling, super kind of reminiscent of the 70s, 60s and 70s, very kind of like hippie-ish feeling. But there's really not too much to say for me. It's a nice portrait. This is a beautiful child. The light is pretty. I don't know how much I love the kind of purple-ish toning, although I really do like the way that it affects the hair color of this gorgeous kid. Seems mostly to be just a clean portrait, although I don't know that the styling particularly adds. I mean, this kiddo could have been in just about any clothes, and I think I would have liked it as much as I like it now. So I don't know that the styling is necessarily doing any favors. It actually reminds me, do you guys remember the Florabella? They had ads out for quite a while for actions and stuff. Yeah, and had those kind of stylized portraits of little girls. This kind of reminds me of that a little bit. I don't know how much I love the grade and the style. But for the most part, it's just a really clean portrait. I don't have too much to add. Can you zoom in a little bit, Kate?
Yeah.
It does kind of look, now I recognize that there's a little bit of, I can't tell if it's compression or if the file size is just smaller, because it almost looks like the eyes and the lips and the nostrils have been a little bit over sharpened and the skin maybe softened a little bit, but it's kind of hard to tell. It might just be because this is small. If that is the case, I feel like it could have done without that, because the skin does feel a little bit too soft, and I feel like we're missing these beautiful freckles a little bit. But aside from that, not really too awful much to critique. So mostly styling, I think, isn't necessarily helping much. And if the styling was the purpose, then I'm not really reading it enough to be like, oh, it makes perfect sense why it's styled this way. But for the most part, not too awful much really to critique. It's a pretty image of a pretty kid. The whites of the eyes maybe just a little bit overdone. It's kind of hard to tell. Yeah, I don't really have too awful much critique for this one, aside from those 3 issues.
Olga?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to completely agree with you. I think it's a pretty image. The styling's kind of just off a little bit, and I wish it was just a little bit more dialed into what exactly the photographer was going towards. But I think if they cropped her hand out, I think, because really what this image has going for it is just the connection of the model. So if they cropped it, like the bottom half of it out, it would really take away most of the distractions, and you would just see like the pose and the striking eye contact that the little girl is making. But other than that, that's pretty much all I have to say as well about it.
I will circle back just really fast.
No.
Well, you can't stop me. Just to say that I think if we were going for a kind of a throwback, kind of hippie kind of feel, which, you know, the clothing, the styling feels a lot, it almost, and this is just a thought or suggestion, this is not necessarily a solid critique, but it could have been really cool to drive that point home with some grading that was reminiscent of film colors of that era, to kind of make it feel like it fit a little bit more, even though this is almost, it's kind of pushing monochromatic. But maybe if your point was to kind of go with that styling and that feel for the image as if it was kind of a retro vibe, then it would have been maybe more helpful to kind of go with that film-ish kind of grade look for this one. But that's just a thought to consider, and not necessarily, I mean, that's probably more of a taste issue, but I think if you had gone there, then the styling would have made a lot more sense, and it would have felt like a retro inspired image a little bit more than it does now.
Mm-hmm. So there are a couple technical things with this. One is I do agree it has that kind of like action preset kind of effect that I think we've seen a lot of, which isn't necessarily a bad thing if that's your preferred style, but I also feel like it's a little bit maybe outdated or a bit overdone. And it's kind of unclear with this photo whether she's supposed to look like she's in an environment or if she isn't. Like, there's texture on the right side of the image that feels like you're trying to go for that sort of painted backdrop effect, but then on the left side there's a sort of foliage, and I think you have to kind of commit to one or the other. If we didn't have the foliage behind her, I think it would be a bit stronger and feel more like this kind of backdrop. But because we do have that foliage, I want to see more of that. And I want to see, I don't mind like a shallow depth of field by any means, but this is just, it's too shallow, and you've kind of faded off into nothingness on the right side. And so there's a disconnect between the left side of the image and the right side in terms of the background. Even if you cropped it vertical and got rid of a lot of the space on the right side, I think that would have helped some, or centered her on the frame a little bit more. So as far as like composition goes, the cropping could be stronger. I think she could be centered a bit more in the image because she has such a strong connection to the camera. I think you could definitely get away with full-on center for her. The posing, the hand in there that has this sort of playful feel, and the styling kind of reads a bit more playful too, but there's just something that's like not quite there yet, and maybe it's just maybe we need a little bit more from the pose or body language that kind of reads towards that playfulness. Maybe she's just like a little more coy or shy in her pose, or maybe there's some movement in the hair or something that gives it that sort of whimsical, ethereal vibe. As far as like the technical stuff, the hand feels a little like muddled or dirty down at the bottom, which some dodge and burn will clean up pretty quick. And then there's some blown out highlights in the hair and on the chest area, which should be addressed as well. But it's an interesting image to me because I think you guys are right. When you look at it at first glance, there's nothing really wrong with it, but it also doesn't really grab your attention the way that it could. And so I think that's an interesting talking point. Like why do some images grab us and why do some of them we just kind of pass by? And I think that's worth kind of acknowledging and discussing. And I think I've given a couple thoughts as to how I might make it more eye-catching, but yeah, it's an interesting thing.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think I'm not sure if it almost looks like maybe the background was a natural background with quite a few filters or some other thing placed over it, because it looked like there's quite a bit of texture.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to tell, but I agree. I think you could go maybe one direction or the other, where either it looks full on like a natural scenario, which would really suit the kind of vibe if this is going for that kind of earth flower child, lovey hippie type vibe, which would really suit that to be in kind of a natural environment.
Yeah, for sure.
But I mean, one way or the other, I think would definitely make it stronger. And I would agree. I don't know that an asymmetric composition in this case necessarily does it any favors, but it also may come down to a taste issue for that kind of thing and what the intention of the image was. But
I think part of it is for me, and this is something that I struggle with when I shoot too, and especially cropping at that kind of like mid upper arm thing, is it feels very like boxy and like she's just like a blob, right? Like she's just like triangle if you kind of like block her out as just like a thing on the screen. Like there's not a lot of interest in the composition, right? Like we talk about creating triangles when we make art, right? Have an arm that sticks out a little bit more, or have the hand kind of just somewhere else, and instead of everything feeling so like rigid and confined to that sort of rectangular box. And I think that's where you start creating interest in a photo. And here even she's in that rectangular kind of box, but it's also skewed. There's like a little bit of a lean to it too, so that's a little unsettling as far as composition goes. So I think the backdrop stuff notwithstanding, what could make this image more compelling is just playing around with different poses and different angles. I think the connection in the eyes is really good. She's a really interesting looking girl, and she like you want to kind of know more about her and what she's all about, and I could definitely see her fitting into this more like bohemian kind of vibe. So like don't be afraid to push that and really kind of play with that theme, and try to work with different shapes and angles to really kind of sell that point.
Fair enough. Yeah, I don't really have too much to add. I don't mind posing inside the body line. Yeah, I mean, I think at this point it's mostly kind of suggestions for things to try, and less like I don't think the image necessarily needs to be fixed. You know what I mean? Like I think that there are maybe things that you could try and explore to kind of like strengthen the clarity of the intention, but I don't know that there's, this is a totally sellable, usable image. It's just that weird place where we're trying to critique a thing and give like positive, constructive feedback that you can use to get, to be better, and to make images that are stronger. But this is just in that place where it's like pretty and totally usable, and so looking for those things that can help without being destructive, I guess. I don't really know how to word that. Looking for those things that are like
I think it's also like, so for instance, I have done plenty of shoots where one pose it's fine, it looks okay, and then you make like kind of a subtle adjustment and all of a sudden it like totally changes the image. And I feel like maybe in this shoot, maybe the photographer could go through and kind of take a second look at some of the images with these sort of compositional things in mind, and see if there's anything else that reads maybe a little bit stronger, a little bit more dynamic as far as pose and as far as that connection. I will sometimes revisit work after I haven't seen it in like 6 months or a year or 2 years or whatever. And have a completely different take on what I think are like the good selects versus the bad selects. So I encourage everyone to do that, regardless of how long you've been shooting, because you shoot and you learn and you keep growing. And you know, not, especially if we're using Photoshop, right? Like all of this stuff is, we can go back to it, files are saved, we can tweak stuff, we can recolor grade, we can retouch. So don't feel like once you've locked something in, that's it.
Right, totally agree. We have a few comments in the comments section. We're getting some love for our awesome jammies, Olga. Also, Becca says, my crotch goblin says, wow, those girls are so beautiful. I already knew I loved her children, but now I just love them more.
For little gremlins.
Molly has confirmed she is a vampire. We knew it.
Knew it.
Also, Zach says, no Knight's Tale critique stream. I'm out. So bye, Zach.
Can we please, though?
At some point, please let's critique our favorite movies. Oh my God, I would love to do that. So yeah, we have lots of awesome people with us, so I'm super excited.
Yay.
So who was this one, Kate? Who is this awesome photographer?
This is Edie Leyland.
Nice job, Edie. Yeah, very pretty. I would love for you to tell us what your intentions were, because I realize, and we've talked about this before, that when we first see an image, we're seeing it as any random viewer might encounter it in any space. And so we have to make decisions based on purely what's given us for the image. But it's always interesting for us to hear what your intentions were, because that definitely can make a difference in, you know, how you interpret an image after you know. So let us know if we were on with, you know, what you were going for, or if you had something kind of else going on that maybe wasn't in the image.
Totes
my goats.
My goats.
Nick?
Fashodo Baggins.
Fashodo
Baggins. Stop it.
Olga never stopped.
Don't ever stop though.
Damn it.
Okay, can I just say really quick, if this color grade was given to the other image, I would have been really super happy.
On board, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love, my first instinct is that I super love this color grade, but my second one was that it really would have suited the feel, that kind of nostalgic feel that the other image felt like it was going for to me, but not quite achieving.
I didn't mind the color grade of the last image too much. I do agree it could have worked with vintage, but I think some kind of in between would be good too, because the purple tones were a nice contrast to her hair and her skin tones, but it could have also had like an overall kind of like sepia cast to reinforce that bohemian vibe. And this one feels bohemian.
It definitely has that kind of 70s, definitely 70s inspired kind of street.
Warm.
Yeah. Kind of almost film feel.
Yeah. Wasn't that what gave that? It was film, that like warm with the cool highlights and then the warm mids and shadows.
I don't know the ins and outs of what made, I mean, I know there were several different kinds of films, but I definitely know that those kind of warm oranges were a hallmark of like film at that time.
Yeah.
But I think that there's definitely a lot to like about this image, as far as I think the grade really works. I like the hints of the background that give you kind of a sense of place without overwhelming the subject. I think the light is really super pretty. I don't even mind the blown out parts a little bit. Sometimes for me, that can actually add to a sense of like honesty, I suppose. That doesn't feel like it's overdone or over processed, almost makes it feel like it's kind of just caught in a moment. So sometimes I kind of actually like those little, what would be considered technical imperfections, but I don't mind in this case. I don't know how much I love the crop. It makes me feel like maybe there should be something at the top of the image, like maybe it was trying to make space for copy or something. But honestly, there's not really too much that I dislike about the image aside from that. The background has a great sense of place. So I think maybe that could have been incorporated a little bit in the crop of the image in a way that doesn't make it feel quite so off balance or bottom heavy. But for the most part, I like the muted tones. I like even the lack of like any strong blacks or like really hard contrast. Yeah, that would really kind of be my only thing. I feel like even the styling has a kind of nostalgic feel to it that suits the color grade and even the kind of impression from the background. So yeah, in general, I just really like this one. I think my main thing is just looking for a crop that makes a little bit more sense. But aside from that, I dig.
I'm with you on the crop, and I don't know if I want to push him further down in the frame and see more of what's happening above, or push him up and see more of what's going on below the elbow. Because it looks like it could be a really interesting jacket, but right now I don't know if this is supposed to be about the clothing or it's supposed to be about his attitude, because to me they're kind of competing right now, and there's not enough detail in the jacket to really make it fully realized. But also there's definitely like an attitude to the expression, which I think is really compelling. So for me, I might even crop in a little tighter or push him further down in the frame and get more of what's happening above.
Okay, you need to take a break.
It's interesting because I saw this on my desktop. I'm on a laptop now, but on my desktop, it seemed a lot more saturated, and I actually prefer the slightly less desaturated look, the way it's rendering on my laptop screen. That was going to be one of my comments, but especially in the highlights, people tend to push the cyans and the highlights, which I totally get, and I do the same thing, but you have to be really careful not to push it too much. So my desktop monitor is it reads Adobe RGB, and this one only reads sRGB. So it kind of just brings up an interesting point of how we sort of perceive things differently depending on what we're viewing on, what screens we're editing on too. So just be mindful of that as well. And the reality is, like, it's going to be, your image quality or color is going to be compromised in one area or another depending on who's viewing it. But yeah, it's a tricky thing. But if the colors were reading more true to my monitor screen, which they should be because that's calibrated accurately, they did feel a little too saturated. But the way I'm seeing them here looks really good. And definitely that lack of saturation here fits the kind of vintage tone a little bit better as well. The only other thing that really drives me nuts is the sunglasses cutting right through the center of the eye. And I know that's kind of tricky to work around given the placement of his face and the expression, but maybe it's just tilting the head a little bit more, or putting the glasses kind of like lower or higher on the bridge of the nose. Just something to keep in mind. It's not a deal breaker for me in this image, but it was one of the first things that I noticed.
I'm gonna have to totally agree. It's funny because I actually wrote stuff down, and like everything you guys are saying is what I wrote down.
You can start next time.
Yeah, okay. The glasses are probably my biggest like it just, every time I see it, just the right through the pupil of the eye, and like Kate said, just a slight head movement. But I've definitely been guilty of doing things like that where I don't notice until later on, where I'm just like, if I would have just had that move 2 millimeters this way.
Yeah, it's hard. Like when you're shooting this stuff, it's really difficult to kind of pick up on all those things, which is why having a really good hair and makeup team and styling team
Yes.
on set with you is so critical. I mean, I definitely have had people on my crew pick up on things that I'd never ever even think of when I'm shooting, and like that's literally their job.
Well, exactly, because you're worried about the way that light's hitting him, like the way that, you know, all the other stuff is, and it's just the minor details that kind of fall on the wayside, and you don't notice until you're sitting there like 3 a.m. culling, going like, oh, cool.
You're like, oh, I wish I'd fixed that.
Right. And so with the glasses, and then one other thing is like, I don't absolutely love the sign behind his head because it's just kind of like jutting out. I wish that maybe it would have been just a little bit more to the side to kind of offset how heavy the bottom and then where his arm is, kind of offset that. So it'd be a little bit more evenly weighted. And other than that, like, I completely agree with what you guys said. And I have paper to prove it. It's kind of, it's kind of tough because some images is just like, you know, there's just a couple of things, and then from then on it's just super nitpicking.
Totally. Well, it's funny about the glasses because they don't bother me at all. That actually doesn't bother me a bit. It has the feel of a fashion inspired portrait rather than like an editorial image, which I think if it was showing more of the coat or more of the background, if it had zoomed out a little bit, I feel like it definitely, since there's not enough detail to warrant like a really pushed in shot, showing the shape and the movement of the jacket seems like it would have been a super kind of editorial or advertorial thing to do. So it definitely feels a little bit more like maybe a fashion portrait, or even it could easily be a cinematic portrait. You know, but yeah, I don't mind the glasses really. I think this is one of those circumstances where probably the smaller things start coming down to taste and intention. So although I just have to say, like, his hair is so damn pretty. Super jealous of those like flowing golden locks.
It's kind of funny that none of us mentioned this like strand that's kind of like coming across and cutting off the hair. But I think, I mean, I think it's kind of a similar thing to the glasses here, right? Where like this guy is giving enough attitude, and he definitely has this kind of persona that is kind of like, I don't give a fuck. So
yeah. But also, it's just kind of like you hopped upon and you saw this guy just standing there, and you're like, oh, take a picture, because, and then with hair, like I'm never nitpicky. I love flyaways. I love movement in the hair. Like maybe if it's like super intrusive, like the hair is like going straight across, like a sleeked back look, it's very obvious. At this, it's messy. It's supposed to be fun. It's like it's supposed to be. It just feels like it's part of the hair instead of being like obtrusive.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. Same.
So this image is by Felix Limon. I think that's
well done, Felix. Yeah, this is a double one for me.
Double thumbs up from Nicole.
Yep.
Solid. Yeah. Excellent job. Excellent color grade. Definitely fits that kind of like vintagey vibe.
What made you pick this image, Kate Woodman, if I may ask?
I mean, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with that cinematic portrait vibe, and obviously my work is very inspired by cinematography, so this certainly resonated with me in that respect. He actually sent in another image too that was a really, really strong portrait, but I think if we get to that one, I'll let Ella take the reins on it, because it's interesting. It's two kind of very distinct styles, which is always interesting to see different styles from the same photographer. It's something that I definitely struggle with a lot coming up through my photography career. It is like, how do I just pick one thing or one style to shoot?
Yeah.
I don't know if I've come up with an answer for that yet, but if I do, I'll let you know. All right.
Right on. Well done, Felix. I super like this image.
Soups.
Good job, sir.
Totes my goats.
If
all the goats.
Toasty goats?
Toasty goats. I will never forget. Do you remember when James Earl Jones, I don't know if you remember or not, do you remember when James Earl Jones did the top 10 on David Letterman for Y2K?
No.
Oh, and at the end he said number 10 was like stuff's gonna explode, but he said it in that James Earl Jones voice, like stuff's gonna explode. Well, that commercial was going on at that time where he's like, totes my goats. It was like the best thing ever.
What happened to James Earl Jones?
He's still
just like
around?
is he just like living this life of luxury and retirement like Sean Connery?
Oh God, I hope so.
Wasn't he also the voice of Mufasa in The Lion King? Like they kept him. Yeah.
Yep. Who
Mufasa.
else could have done that? Like, come on.
Truth.
Lone Star.
Totally different guy, but it's cool.
Yeah, I know. That was the point, though.
Both very beloved.
Yeah.
Okay, so Olga, you go first.
Okay, I'm going to go first, which is great because I honestly do not have much to say about this. I really like it. I'm looking at it and it's like a composite. I'm pretty sure it's not my forte, so my 2 cents is whatever. The only thing I would say is that there's like some texture around the image. It's actually pretty hard to see on the Zoom, but when you look at the files that Kate sent us, it's a little bit more obvious. It kind of looks like a window sheen or something. It just seems like really out of place.
I feel like I see what you're talking about.
Yeah. It's like maybe somebody taking a picture out of a car and it's like the sheen from the window. Like I don't really understand what.
Right. Like there's even just a little bit of lens flare right in the center or a little bit left of center by the flower that's dangling down.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I see what you're talking about.
And like the streaks. So it's like, is it rain? It could be rain. But even the fact that I don't really understand what it is kind of plays into what I'm saying, is that it just kind of seems like an added extra it's a little confusing. But that is just nitpicking because I think it's a great photo, the composite, and I don't really have much to say on that aspect. So take it away, somebody else.
Go Woodman. I'll go last since I've been going early.
I think this is awesome. Like the concept is really amazing, and I commend you for what is probably hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of work cutting all of this stuff out. I have a little sense for this photographer's process, and it is impressive. The biggest thing that jumps out to me is the white space in the middle and what the intention with that is. I think if this is going to be some kind of like background for something, having that white space in the middle, that breathing room, if you're going to put something in front of that or in that space, is really valuable. I think about this a lot when I design my backdrops because you can't really treat them the same as you would a regular photo. Mm-hmm. That being said, if that isn't the case, there definitely seems like there's some detail back there, right? Like this tree, and then we do have the streaks, which I don't think they're necessary at all. But we have some sense of a background or what's happening over there. Like this stuff up in the corner, I can't tell if that's like a mountain landscape thing that's coming down, or if that's just more streaking, and if it is streaks, why is it the opposite direction of this? So I think I would just like to see the background realized a little bit more, and have some more dimension to it, I guess, like put in some more of the mountains, but and keep that kind of hazy, foggy look, but give us just a little bit more detail so that it has a lot of depth to the scene. Totally agree with Olga about the streaks. I think this image is so beautiful and strong that it doesn't need it. I don't really know what the purpose of it is and what it's contributing to the image. I don't think it makes it stronger. So I think it could be fine without it. And then the last thing is really kind of color differential. We have a lot of saturation in the birds and in the flowers, but then it seems like the tree branches themselves feel like gray and desaturated, and I just wish there was a little bit more color consistency across this part of the image. Like, this in general feels more saturated in the bottom corner than this corner here, but then we have more saturation and this kind of lens flare up here. So like this is colorful, but then this little patch that isn't, and then this is colorful, and so on and so forth. So I think if you're gonna go with this kind of saturated leaves, desaturated branch effect, that's totally fine, but make it consistent. And yeah, what else? I think I don't mind this flare too much, but I think it being so bright and so yellow compared to the rest of it is kind of throwing me for a bit of a loop. But yeah, I think that's all I got on this one.
Could you give me one zoom, like one plus
Yeah.
in? Cool. Actually, give me two and go into the leaves for me a little bit, like behind, like to the right of the parrots.
I would if I could figure out how to move this thing.
Space bar.
Oh, yeah. I'm just gonna do this. Where you want to go?
I just want to go in to the right of the parrots because I have a feeling that, okay. So what it looks like to me is that some filters have been run on these things to give them the look that they're not quite a photograph. If you look, there's kind of some texture and some other things happening that give it a painted effect. Mm-hmm. Even you can see that in the parrots because they're not quite as sharp as what they would be for what a photograph is on its own. Mm-hmm. And so I have the feeling that some of the effects that were then added, like those streaks, were kind of meant to be contributing to the feeling that it's a piece of artwork and not necessarily a composited photograph, which I think if we're going in that direction, we could have probably pushed it just a little bit harder. It's fair to take something like this and push it toward the realm of a painting. And if you're going to go that way, I think you can push it so that it really goes that way. And if not, just being a composited photograph is fine. Like that, there's no reason to differ from that unless that's your intention. And if it is, I think everything needs to be clear that that's what it's doing. You can zoom back out, Kate. I was just making some assumptions there, which just from this image is the look that it has. However, that being said, I think it's a really beautiful vision. I think it's done with an incredible amount of skill. I like these little climbing flowers. I don't know how much I like the position of the one closest to the parrots. I think it could actually be raised up just a little bit because having all that white space does lend itself to copy or something else. And where the flower is at feels like it wants to be just a little bit higher. But honestly, even the stuff that you picked out, Kate, is not anything that I would have particularly noticed with the image on my own. I don't mind the background probably because it gives me more of a painterly feel where that's not important. It's meant to just like give the impression of a sense of space rather than like actually recall the space entirely. So for me, that I don't mind that as much. But I do think if you're going to soften what's going on in the background and give it kind of the look of a wider, like a more open focal length, then probably the flora and the fauna on the left side of the image could have been softened up a little bit as well, as it's not as necessary going along with the idea of a piece of art. But really that's all super nitpicky because I don't think any of that stuff is going to be important to most of the people who see this image. I think that it's so strong by itself, really, that anything we say about it is going to be really minuscule stuff compared to how lovely it is. I think any zoo, I think any animal rights organizations, I think any conservation places, I think this is like a highly usable and sellable commercial image for a lot of different purposes. So other than super duper minor stuff, I really don't have much to complain about. I agree. I think maybe the lens flare and the glow is just a little bit much. Given that parrots are the
like
main
parlor trick.
Yeah.
Like, it's not necessary.
Yeah,
it's
like
such,
given
it's such a strong piece on its own that like it's like every artist that like can't figure out when to stop, right? And they're like, I'll just splash this one more thing on it. And you're like, no, it's good. Stop it. Leave it alone.
Yeah, I mean, I think you want to see, like, it's clear that where the light is coming from and that you have, you know, that light source reflected like in the birds and where everything is going. So, and I don't mind the effect of it. I do think it maybe is a touch much because they would be blown out and backlit a little bit, the sun being where it is. But yeah, I mean, even like, it's all super nitpicky to me. I just think that I think this is a really super strong image. I think it's super pretty and I just like it. So yeah, those are just small things for me, little things that could kind of play into the whole. If you're gonna make it a painterly, as in done by hand image, I think you can go farther with what you've done. Just adding the streaks as the most obvious point is not the way to go. Those would be better used if the rest of the image reflected the look of a hand painted image.
I'm curious as to what size this is intended to be, because I think that would affect my my thoughts on the amount of white space there is. Like, if this is postcard size, I don't think the amount of white space would bother me as much, but if this is meant to be printed large, that's a lot of empty space. And one alternative solution to adding more content in the background would be to push the left side over a little bit more and crop it at maybe like a 4x5 instead of a 4x6, just to kind of like, because I don't think you'd be missing anything if you did that, but you know, take that for what it's worth, and let us know what you think. Does it say? It might say on the top here. Give you the, oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, so 70.9 by 47.25 inches. So if you're gonna print it that big, that is a lot of space. So just maybe think about the scale of that and how much white space is really necessary.
Sure. I'm glad that we get to see his little information there. I am a fan of Jesper's work, just to like be completely honest about that.
Awesome.
Yeah, and the other things that he's done are absolutely unique and really, really incredible and impressive to look at. I think he's doing some things that are not many people are exploring. So definitely really enjoy seeing that. Yeah, and I would not mind owning some of his pieces. They're really, really lovely.
Yeah. Well done, Jesper.
Yes. Yes. And so before we get to the next one, yes, Becca is asking, where do we each draw the line between a photograph and digital art?
Becca, it doesn't matter.
Tell us how you really feel, Woodman.
I don't know. I think the whole argument of what's a photograph, what's digital art is just gallerist bullshit. I don't know. Like, people, it's the same argument of like, this is a purist photograph versus like, I have done no editing on this versus like a composite, right? Like people have their ideas of what is okay and what isn't okay and what we should label shit. And I don't, like, whatever, do what you want to do and don't worry about what other people are saying, because in the end of the day, like, you're going to get the job done. People are going to like your work. The people who like it are going to buy it. The people who don't like it are going to stay in their caves and like do their own thing and buy their purist art, and that's fine. Like there's a market for everyone and everyone's type of art. So
what about you, Miss Olga Tenyanin?
I don't have an opinion. I'm on Kate. I'm just like, if it passes for a photograph, then it's a photograph. You call it a composite, then it's a composite. I don't really care. I'm not trying to argue over like semantics of, I don't know. It all just doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think as long as you can get to the point stylistically or skill-wise that you're happy with, and it doesn't really matter how you went about it. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I look at something like this, and I'm sure it took forever to composite all that stuff out, and I'm sure there are probably ways to do it that maybe are more efficient, or maybe you could create this in like some kind of rendering software. I don't really know, but like, I don't know. I feel like there's certain situations where having this kind of hands-on process is really important and informs a piece of art. But I don't know. I think the Photoshop versus digital rendering versus CGI or whatever it is what it is. I don't think there needs to be a distinction, or we need to worry so much about it. Olga's doing. What do you think? Nicole thinks the opposite of us. She's gonna fight me.
She has thoughts. She has all sorts of thoughts.
I always have lots of thoughts and opinions about things. No, I mean, I think in some ways I definitely agree that, you know, a beautiful piece is a beautiful piece, and I don't give a crap how it was created. But distinctions are important for people who care. I mean, if what you want is to create a true photograph, or what you want is to be known as a digital artist, or if I'm going to hire somebody to create, you know, key art for my video game, I'm probably not going to hire somebody who's just a photographer. I'm probably going to hire somebody who can create complex digital artwork like this. So I think there's times when those distinctions do become important, not necessarily have anything to do with the quality of the final image, but just as far as, you know, words mean something because they're distinct from other words. So
yeah, but here's a question, Nicole. If you hire someone to create key art, are you hiring them because they do digital manipulation, or because they have a portfolio that's caught your eye and it looks really interesting?
So it completely depends, right? If I'm looking at somebody who, you're obviously going to look at work that is in line with the kind of work you want to create. And a lot of times for things that are fantasy or non-reality based, they require a different skill set than somebody who doesn't do that kind of work. So, I mean, there's a potential that they could hire out for that kind of stuff. But I mean, if I'm going to create key art for my video game, I probably want somebody who's skilled in that department. And this kind of work, which is pretty clearly not a photograph, like as in everything that's in the image was there upon the click of the shutter, is going to be the kind of person I'm going to be interested in, because if I have changes or I have other things that, you know, need to be happened or added or removed or whatever, then I'm going to have confidence that that person can handle it. So I think that those definitions really only come into play when we're talking about intention and what you need that for.
You're still going to judge their competency based on their portfolio.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, I don't think that the definition has anything to do with image quality. You know what I mean? So there was this conversation back when I was still shooting boudoir. There was always this kind of argument around what boudoir photography was. And there were a lot of people who would get really upset with you trying to put kind of any definition around. They're like, well, it's whatever you want it to be. For me personally, no, it is not, because if it is, then nothing is anything. If we can call anything anything, then we never actually can have any conversations about anything, because it can be anything. I mean, I keep using the word anything, but that's to say that, like, there are definitions of things for a reason, because otherwise we can't even have conversations about them. If you and I don't agree on what we're speaking about, then it doesn't make any sense to ever call anything by a name. What do you need, child? No, you need to go.
Parenting.
Go. Yeah, you know, I don't know where my husband is. He's somewhere in this house, obviously not watching the children. So we'll have a conversation about that later.
I get that point. And I also feel like this is something, like I do a lot of composite work, but I try to do composite work that feels photorealistic. And so a lot of times people don't know I do composite work.
Sure.
And I do wonder if not like specifically calling that out and announcing that I do composite photography is preventing me from getting jobs that people assume they'll need composite photography for. I hope not, but it is a valid question, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and it obviously has nothing to do with the quality of the image. Like that has nothing to do with whether somebody's a photographer or digital artist or anything else. I think it comes into play, you know, like when it needs to be there. Like, but that being said, I do think it is a good thing to bring up that they are, you know, so here's the thing. You are a photographer who also composites, right? Like most of what's in your image, I would hazard myself to say all of what's in your images. I don't think you do much photo bashing, if I'm wrong. I mean like using other people's photography to supplement what you are photographing. Most of yours is your own work, right? So what you have created is all based on photography and all based on your own work. And there are plenty of times where everything that you're shooting is in the scene that you're working, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so the skill set of a photographer is 100% there. Whereas somebody whose specialty is in digital manipulation may not completely or even always or even most of the time shoot their own work. So it's important, I think, at that point to make that distinction between photography versus digital manipulation or digital artistry, because then those people don't necessarily have to acquire the skill set of a photographer in order to manipulate or composite or paint. So never important to quality, but worth talking about when it concerns what an image is used for or what you hire somebody for, and whether or not that's something that you're interested in. So if I'm a collector of photography and my goal is to collect photographs, and if I had something pawned on me that was a digital manipulation and I came to find that out, I would be upset, because to me this is not me, by the way, I'm inhabiting, you know, an imaginary person. But for those people, there is something about the inherent quality of a photograph that is taken, you know, that is a recorded history, a snapshot, an image in time, whatever. And for them, that's an important aspect of photography. And then for other people, they do not care how the image came about as long as it's something that resonates with them. So I think it's fair to make that distinction and say, you know, this is a composite or this is a photograph. But I don't think that we should conflate them, because they are two separate things. And in order to actually ever have a dialogue around it, they need to have their own distinctions.
That's fair. I don't know if that answers your question, Becca, or just we try.
I think she says that she's enjoying the back and forth. So,
okay. Well, I mean, think
like,
go ahead.
Oh, just in the grand scheme of things, like Nicole is saying, like you're not, you know, one isn't better than the other, but the distinction does matter in certain aspects, you know, of what it is. But I mean, yeah, you said it all.
I mean, I say a lot.
Yeah, you say a lot. I'll just hire.
Always such a great thing.
Can I just hire you to say things for me? I'll just be like, you go say the thing.
I'm gonna hire Nicole to be my rep.
Yeah, you go say the thing. Poet laureate, that's her.
Segues nicely into our final image here.
Oh, so let's just one more time give a shout out to this photographer before we.
Jesper, I'm gonna butcher your last name. Is it Krigsman? Krigsman? Jesper, tell us how to say your name.
Sorry. Jesper, beautiful work, sir. I am a fan.
Yeah, big fan. All right, so our final image
I know this work.
Do you?
I do, so maybe I should go last.
Me too. Red.
That means you, Olga.
That's 2 times in a row that I go first, and I'm offended.
You'll live.
This is not a democracy.
Okay.
Becca says she's just instigating, by the way.
Yeah, she's playing devil's avocado. over
She's
there.
like,
She knows all our buttons to poke.
she does. Button poker.
So, I mean, obviously, this is another composite of sorts, digital image composite of things. A couple of things. I like the kind of like the techie type of digital, like futuristic type stuff. I play a lot of video games. I get it. I like it. A couple of things I noticed is that I just wish that I think the shadowy people in front were a little bit more pronounced. I get what they're doing. They're trying to create like I think a cloned copy type warehouse situation of people stacked, but I wish that they were just a little bit more in the forefront. You can kind of see because in the top you can see the shoulders and then they kind of disappear from the bottom. Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of it's kind of tricky because it's like you can see the top halves but you don't see the bottom halves, but then you see possibly their bottom halves or her hips. So right. it's kind of unclear what's going on, and I wish it was just a little bit more of a clarity, a little bit more of set and setting, a little bit more cohesiveness over there. But other than that, I don't really, guys, this sucks. I don't have much to say. Next time we're just doing all boudoir photos.
Hey, which begs the question, like, hey, boudoir photographers, give us your stuff.
Yeah, what's up with that?
I don't know anything about boudoir photography, so.
Me neither.
Lies.
Both of you are liars.
I will poke you with my horn.
All right.
Don't lie, Olga, about stuff.
I mean, like, other than that, like, you know, it's, anything I would say I feel is just like nitpicky, and I don't have much to say, and I'm so sorry.
I agree with you about that bottom section, and I didn't notice it until you pointed it out, but it is kind of strange that there's this sort of hard line at the bottom where everything else feels blurred and it doesn't really feel resolved to me. Like, you're right, I can't tell if that's like the side of her hip or if it's the curve of the person's body in front, in which case why is it a hard line
when the top is so blurry, you know, unless they're like standing with their hips. I don't know.
I think the blur and the what's the word I'm looking for? I'm drawing a blank.
Words are hard.
They are hard.
But the depth of field is the phrase I'm looking for here.
The blurry blur
photography fail
of field photography 101 is I don't know if I'm 100% sold on it for this image. It is kind of difficult to tell unless you really sit with the image for a bit. What the people blocking her view are. And I think, you know, getting people to sit with an image is really valuable, except when it's something like this that is clearly designed with more of a key art intent. And I think when you do something like that, it has to immediately draw people's attention and it has to immediately make sense. So I think making the people in the foreground just a little bit more sharp would help kind of resolve that. There's some symmetry and like offsetting here that feels intentional but also doesn't quite feel right to me. And maybe that's kind of part of the point, right? Like if everything's a little askew, it makes you uncomfortable, which for a movie or film like this or whatever, maybe that's kind of part of it. But just from a purely compositional perspective, she's slightly off of center, and then she has this white line that's slightly off of center to the other side, and then the two characters in front are also slightly off center, and they're centering, like the gap is centered on her, which is good, but they're either too far off center or not far off center enough. So either make them, like, have her totally centered in the image, or just push everything to one side a little bit more to make it feel like it's intentionally offset. Otherwise, I'm curious to know what's happening on her chest. It feels kind of like almost like a rib cage x-ray kind of thing, but I'm not really sure, and I'm not really sure how critical it is to the concept. But otherwise, the design is super cool. I like all of the overlay text and the sort of chemistry bonds, symbolism. I think you have this kind of dark spot that's naturally created between the two characters up front, which is a kind of a perfect natural spot to put your title. So maybe pushing that title up into that space a little bit more, or bringing some of that darkness down a little bit more, so that feels a little bit more centered. And I think you could probably benefit from a slightly larger title, but that's just kind of nitpicky.
Molly said she should turn us saying nitpicky into a drinking game, so I'm just picturing her like reluctantly pouring herself another shot. Like,
pretty sure that's the first time I've said it tonight, Molly.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Please continue.
No, I think that's it. I mean, the color grading is super cool. This photographer is really good at that sort of monochromatic, desaturated, kind of like oppressively one color kind of aesthetic, and does it very well. And I like the styling. It kind of makes her feel like she's like in this factory of clones or something, and she has this kind of like sheen to her, like she just was born from some kind of egg or something.
Goo.
Warm liquid goo phase.
Exactly. So I think everything fits conceptually, and all the ideas are there. It's just kind of playing with composition a little bit.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think so obviously, which I don't know if you guys have noticed, if you look at much key art, there is a lot of playing with stuff intentionally that you would not do in a normal photograph. Like, you get away with a lot of stuff that you wouldn't do for the purpose of like directing the eye and things that, like, if we were looking at this purely as a photograph, that we might critique. So keeping that in mind, my biggest issue with this image is already one you mentioned, and that is just with the composition. I want her centered, because the title Sapient, which I think is perfectly done, because that eye is so stretched, I want it going straight up her chest. I need it to be like midline on her. I don't know why, but it needs to happen. And it feels like what the photographer did was try to balance using this idea of an open door to kind of give her this rim light, and try to keep the two so that they were balanced center, rather than like have this really bright piece kind of off center. But I don't think that would have bothered me, because it's clear that she is the focal point of the image. And I think that conceptually it's so strong. And I think that the photographer chose kind of all of the right elements to bring that out. That really the only thing that I would want to change is kind of the arrangement. I would want her composed in the center. I don't even mind the smaller title, because it's so bright. It kind of visually takes up a lot of space, even though physically it doesn't take up a lot of space. Mm-hmm. I don't even mind kind of having the foreground elements confused. I think that plays a little bit with this idea of not quite, like, you have a very strong impression of what's going on, but it isn't super clear. So I don't even mind that. Honestly, I think this could probably be picked up and used tomorrow with that one change. I know that there's a few of these images that I'm feeling like I don't really have too awful much to pick on. And I think part of that is because, especially with an image like this, given the purpose that it's for, most of the time key art is designed to get across a really strong idea in a really short amount of time. And it isn't necessarily dependent upon a lot of the traditional conventions that we would use as photographers. It kind of pushes a little bit almost more into the kind of art-esque, I don't know if that's the right word to use, but the realm where you kind of can feel comfortable bending some of those rules a little bit more. So even though I don't disagree with anything you guys have said, I guess that's just a pedantic, long-winded way of saying it doesn't really bother me. And I don't necessarily think any changes would be necessary to make this 100% usable, simply because the concept is so strong.
Without critique, Nicole.
I know,
Right.
Sorry. I think for this one, it's not so much that I have to critique the image itself, but more that I guess I'd want to just say that there are times when photography is being used in a way that the traditional ways that we would critique an image don't necessarily apply, if that makes sense. Like there are times when things that you would do if an image was meant to stand on its own as an image don't apply, because it's the purpose of the image is to be used in a different way. And I don't think anybody would see this and mistake it as anything other than a piece of intended key art.
Yeah. But I also think it's really important, especially for someone at a more advanced level, to still be able to notice those things and find critique. And like I think I've said this on a previous episode, that the more established we get, the more set in our ways we become, and the more difficult it is to kind of recognize some issues within our images. And I'm not saying this necessarily has any, but I think there's always something that you can find in an image to kind of push it in a different direction, or at least get you thinking about in the next image, how are you going to make it better, and how are you going to use those thoughts consciously and put them to good use. So each time you're improving. So
I don't disagree.
Nobody is above critique.
No,
all of us, ourselves included.
No, 100%. And I don't disagree with any of that at all. Yeah.
Cool. Well, so this image is by Bryce Chapman.
Yeah, I know it. I have seen it before.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of Bryce's.
Same.
I think he conceptually creates such strong, cohesive work. Yeah, I'm a fan.
I want to say I'm really impressed by the photographers who've submitted. It's a lot of this is really high caliber work, and you make our jobs difficult, but it's also good for us to kind of really dig in and really start to notice the details.
100%. And even at times when there isn't a whole lot we feel like we can critique, if we can elucidate why we think something is strong, that can be just as valuable, because then we're still having to break down the image and look at things like light and composition and subject matter and all of that stuff that we have to consider when we're critiquing is still stuff we have to consider if we're trying to explain why we think something is strong. So a couple of the images in here kind of in that same vein, where for the average viewer, they're never going to notice some of the stuff that we're picking on, and the suggestions, even if they make it stronger from a trained photographer's eye, aren't going to make that much of a difference to your average buyer or average viewer. So it's kind of an interesting dichotomy how seeking critique makes us stronger photographers, especially if it's critique that actually matters, or that sometimes you get critique that doesn't really apply. But if you can apply the things that you use and it strengthens your images, then that's always a plus. But I do also think it's important to remember that sometimes where images are going, or who they're going to be used by, not to say that it allows you to be lazy or anything like that, because it completely doesn't, but plenty of images. I guess it's this: you don't necessarily need an absolutely world-class image in order to make a living off of it.
Succinctly put.
After all of the bumbling around before that, took me a minute apparently to come to that conclusion. So
know your audience. That's the bottom line.
Yes.
Know your audience's skill level.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you go to an art director with this, they may be more critical than if you showed this to your mom.
Right.
Just
sure.
saying.
Or if you were working with maybe a small independent filmmaker, probably going to have a completely different feedback than from a huge production company. So
yeah. Yep. Cool. Well, any final thoughts from you ladies? Tried to keep this to an hour, but we just talked too much. So
I just encourage anybody who's still in the group and still watching, if you guys have any comments or thoughts, throw those in really quick before we head out so we can kind of get to them.
Do we put Molly to sleep yet?
Molly is the last comment still right now.
Oh, she's strong.
Cackling. So it seems like she's still in there. I just want to say I'm glad that we get to do this because I was super in my feelings today. It's just one of those days that random things just kind of get you down, whether that's like, the quarantine, like being stuck at home, or questions about like the future and what art and photography and just art in general is going to look like for us, during and post corona apocalypse, and other random things, just dumb things like the fact that I'm getting older and my body is doing weird shit to me, like getting arthritis and doing other things that, are not super exciting. And so it's easy to kind of get down and like, no, I just never want to talk to people again. I'm going to go hide in a hole somewhere and cry about the lack of direction in my life. But it's always good. I'm glad we get to do this because then you guys kind of pull me out of myself a little bit, and so
there's a bigger, broader world out there to get yourself out of your brain.
Things exist beyond just me, apparently.
Not all about you, so
check that ego. All right,
check yourself before you wreck yourself, I believe.
Real.
Is the wise words.
Guys, I had a halo.
As the sage has said. Ooh, check yourself. So Molly is still here.
Let me just nitpick one more time, though.
I just have to say that it's such an awful thing because nitpicking literally means like looking for lice eggs.
Which I love doing.
It's like so gross. Well, you are a monkey, I suppose.
Narwhal?
Super hungry. I didn't know narwhals ate lice nits.
How much do you know about us? We're so special.
You are mysterious creatures, so that is true. It's very true. Almost as mysterious as unicorns. Almost, but not quite.
My horn's a little crooked here.
It doesn't look like we have any more questions or anything coming from the group, although they're continuing to make me laugh. Molly's like, shot. So cool. It looks like that's about it.
Bye.
If you guys have it, make sure that you send us stuff. If you have images you want to critique, send us goodies.
Molly,
and if you have
send
topics,
us
yes, Molly. Yes, who do we have in the comments here? We have Molly, we have Stacy, which we have seen. Becca needs to send us stuff. Brian has sent us stuff, so well done, Brian. Who else is in there? I know David was here for a little while. I don't know if he's still here, but guys, send us the things.
Yay.
And if you have any suggestions for
future
things
shows,
that you would things that you'd like to see us cover, we're trying really, really hard to get our spouses to join us to critique our work. It's Kate's husband that's the holdout, so we need to hold him down.
But we're gonna shame him publicly right now.
Yeah,
shame.
come on.
Shame. Ding ding
Shame,
ding.
shame.
Boom.
Boom.
Yeah, so we have cool things. We just kind of want your guys' suggestions, so give those to us. And if we would really appreciate it if you guys would go check out the YouTube channel and maybe like, subscribe, share. That would be really cool as we're trying to kind of reach audiences and help photographers with, you know, like helpful feedback and stuff like that. So would appreciate that, guys.
Also come hang out with Nicole and I at 2 tomorrow.
Yes. Oh,
That thing that's still happening?
I know. I needed.
Forget about me.
No, I was gonna post the thing today, and then I forgot because I was feeling sorry for myself. So I need to post it this evening. Yes, I'm interviewing Kate tomorrow on the social hour. So come hang out with us and do that. Yes, Becca says she'll let her crotch goblin roast us. So I'm 100% in for that.
Totally.
Definitely do one with the small children. Okay, so aside from that, then work us out, Woodman.
Are we still live?
Yeah, keep dancing because I haven't ended it yet. I'm sorry. I was just waiting to see like how long you guys would go. No, you're stuck. I'm not gonna end it. Sorry, I had wines.
What does the narwhal say?
No, I haven't.
Fix it. Why? Why are you letting people see this?
I'm sorry.
The real us comes out.
It's really funny. Also, because I don't know, you guys are making me laugh. I'm getting a kick out of it. Oh, that's funny. Okay, stopping live stream.
Okay.
I think we're done. I'm sorry. That was really funny.
I hope Molly caught that last bit.